There has never been a better time to be an Illini. Want proof? Let's look back at 2024 and give a preview into 2025.
You are Locked On Illini, your daily podcast on the Illinois Fighting Illini. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Illini. My name, of course, is Sunny Verma. Thank you for making us your first listen each and every day. If you'd like to support the channel, you can find us on your favorite audio platform, or it can be as simple as hitting that like button of this video that you're already watching and making sure you're subscribed. Again, it costs you guys absolutely nothing, but it helps this channel grow immensely. Today, I wanted to do something a little different. Today, obviously, the news on the football side is very splendid. The news on the basketball side looks very promising. But with the new year happening a couple of days ago, I wanted to take at least one episode and just kind of sit back and reflect on just how amazing of a year 2024 was. But before I get started with that, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed. Win or lose, visit FanDuel.com to get started. Again, so for an episode like this, I know I need to find a counterpart who is not arguably, a bigger fan than even I am of both sports. And for that reason, I'm bringing back, actually, recurring guest, I guess I can call you that now, Mike Carpenter from the 200 level. Thank you so much for coming on, Mike.
Thanks for having me, Sunny. I don't know if I'm a bigger fan than you. I might be a little bit older. I don't know what year you were born.
I think I'm a little older than you.
Okay. But, you know, when you broach this idea about reflecting on 2024, I mean, the first thing that came to my mind was that, I was born in 1986, and I've been actively following Illini basketball first and foremost, but then football, which has been a little more sporadic as far as how relevant it is. And there has never been a calendar year as good as 2024. So there's no better time to reflect on it than as we start 2025. And the great news is that I know we'll do predictions later, but there is a chance that 2025 is every bit as good, if not even a little bit better. So that just speaks, I think, to the overall health of the athletic program.
You're exactly right. I talked to Mike right before we went on air. I had a couple ideas in mind for what I was going to use as the lows for football, at least for this episode. And then I realized that this was in the calendar year 2023. And now all of a sudden I had to conjure up, like, I don't remember at any point in my life where I had to go back and really brainstorm what a low point of the football season was. And this year, finishing 10-3 at this point, I'm at that point. And so let's just get started. Mike, you are the guest. I'll let you decide. Do we start with the high? Do we start with the low? And you can pick the sport.
It was tough to figure out the low. Sometimes I get kind of tagged as the cynical Illini fan. I'm really not. I mean, I can be critical when things aren't going well, but I would fully admit in a macro perspective, things are incredible right now. Let's start with men's basketball.
Okay.
And for 2024, because there was the non-conference, and I could say, well, the loss at Northwestern back in December was frustrating, but I don't know. I've been angrier about games than that one. That was more disappointing than anything. I'm going to go with the low point that was actually a couple weeks before the tide kind of turned and the team figured things out. And that was at Penn State. Yeah. This was probably February 20th, thereabouts, third week of February, and you're getting in the stretch run. There was still a chance for Illinois to win a Big Ten title. And Terrence Shannon puts, I think, up a career best of like 34 points, something ridiculous like that. And yet there was basically an implosion in the last minute of the game, kind of keyed on by Coleman, who was so consistent last year. He was really good, except for that game. And really the entire game he was off. So I'll say that as a low point because it effectively knocked you out of Big Ten title contention, which might have been a stretch anyway with the way Purdue was playing. And it brought about a bunch of questions about this team's defense, which really struggled in the month of February. And it was such a far cry from what we saw in the month of March that I think there were genuine frustrations. I mean, the podcast I did that night during the second half, I titled Bad Underwood. a poor pun, admittedly, but a lot of frustrations with Brad as an in-game coach kind of came to the forefront in that. And I think the next morning I woke up wondering, really, what is this team's ceiling? Because we lost that game despite Terrence being Terrence. And I didn't think that bode well for March. Fortunately, that low was quickly forgotten about within the next couple of weeks.
I do remember that game vividly, and especially Coleman Hawkins, just the brain fart he kind of had at the end of that game. I will say, for my side, I'm kind of glad, Mike, but I feel like we should acknowledge it. We would probably say the whole Terrence Shannon Jr. situation was a low point. I didn't really want to bring it up myself, and I'm kind of glad you didn't either. I don't want the listeners to think that we're glossing over that. Of course, we wish that didn't happen, but it's not something I want to exactly delve into. But I wanted to acknowledge that, sure, that did happen.
Well, and I was thinking about that too. The news broke, December 28th or 29th, 2023. That was a dark day. And it was a very odd few months. The tricky thing about that, Sonny, was when that news came out, obviously it was shocking. And then I got to be honest, as a sports fan, I'm kind of reeling because I don't need the guys that I root for to be angels. I don't need them to be superheroes, but that was about as egregious of a crime that one could be accused of. So it makes you kind of question, wait, why am I in this whole rooting for people I don't know business?
Yeah.
Now, he came back against Rutgers. That was a very interesting atmosphere. I was at the State Farm Center for that and won it almost like as a sociological case study, like how are we going to react? How am I going to react?
Yeah.
And then the game started, and then you have to kind of make this choice where, okay, if I'm to abide by the sort of innocent till proven guilty, or just, okay, this is going to be decided by the courts, I have a game to watch, and he's wearing my team's colors.
Yeah.
It was a really interesting 6 weeks. I think as time went on, you gradually just get more comfortable with sort of compartmentalizing the game on the court and whatever's going on outside of that. And certainly Illinois fans got a lot of grief for that, understandably. But the way that it ended and he was exonerated as much as one could have been gives me so much more peace with that. And I think Illini fans in general, and it actually kind of flips the entire story on its head and makes what Terrence did last season that much more remarkable.
Absolutely. And we'll probably be getting to that in a little bit. I mean, I guess that since we've talked about it already, I might as well use that as my low point. For me, it was also just everything I knew about Terrence Shannon Jr. and seeing the crowd reactions, not of the home crowd, but everywhere he visited. And, you get this way more than I do, but just some of the vitriol of the anonymous accounts on Twitter or whatnot, saying literally like the most worst things you can imagine about these kids. And for me, it's like I had to almost question myself. It's like, do I really want to continue doing this when there's people out there who can really say stuff like that? I have nothing to do with the situation, right? So for me, trying to understand how a 23-year-old was handling all of this while putting up arguably the second best player in college basketball numbers on the court, it was just one of those where more power to him. But, it's just it was disappointing to see the dark side of sports, really.
Yeah, for sure. It added so much more weight to last season. And we'll get to the eye here in a second, which directly feeds into the Terrence Shannon saga and just his month of March, which is the most incredible individual performance I've ever seen. Now, one last point about that, for him to do what he did and play once he came back at the level that he did, he might have known, not might have, he knew the entire time what had happened, or I should rephrase, what did not happen. But that did not take off the table the possibility that he might have been found guilty in a court of law, or he might have spent time in jail.
Sure.
That's heavy stuff.
Very.
And what does he do? He just goes about his business and he plays ball, understandably not available to the media, which he probably should not have been to begin with a court case looming. I think that when you see him come back on February 15th, that is a true closing of the circle. We kind of saw it at the beginning of the year when Illinois played Eastern in football and Terrence was there, or was it the Kansas game? Either way, He was the guest of honor that did the air raid siren at the start of the game, and the warm welcome he got. He deserves all the flowers when he comes back. He will get all the flowers when he comes back. And I'm glad that we can close that loop on what was, from afar, from a fan's perspective, difficult to go through in its own way. But that is so minuscule compared to the mental gymnastics he probably had to play.
Yeah, exactly right. Okay, so let's switch off to something a little bit more positive. But actually, no, we have to do the football side still, don't we?
Well, should we do the high of basketball first, and then we do low high of football?
Okay, let's do that. Actually, let's run a break real quick first. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That definitely happened to me. And I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for. And Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. For me, one of the best features is a subscription tracker. I've used it to cancel services I wasn't using anymore. And I've already saved a ton. Plus, with their goals feature, I've been able to automatically set aside money for my future. No more stressing out about budgeting every month. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/locked-on today. That's rocketmoney.com/locked-on. rocketmoney.com/locked-on. All right, Mike, we've acknowledged the low point of basketball. What was your high point?
Terrence Steele and Slam. That's it. We waited all day for that Iowa State Sweet 16 game. I think it was 9 o'clock Central tip, 9:08, something like that when it finally happened. That's a long day to know what's in front of you. And even with UConn looming, I just wanted a shot at them. I could have said UConn is the low point, but listen, we saw that Purdue struggled almost as mightily as you did. No 30-0 run, but still. The Terrence Steele and Slam was such a cathartic moment on so many levels. It bodes even larger based on what we found out in June with his court case. So on a personal level, whoa, what an exclamation point to an incredible season. But the one remaining question about Brad Underwood was, can he win in March? And yeah, he didn't make the Final Four, but to have smoked Duquesne the way that you did, and I think they still would have beaten BYU fairly easily as well. And then to go into what was a high-level basketball game against Iowa State. That was a 2-3 matchup, one of the best of the Sweet 16, if not the best Sweet 16 game this year. And Terrence went out for about 6 minutes with foul trouble. What does he do first? He comes back with about 6 minutes to go. He knocks down a three. Should have been ice cold. Made a three that was absolutely huge. And then the steal and slam. And I will give an honorable mention to Coleman, like a rocket missile out of the right side of your screen, damn near stealing the inbounds when Iowa State put it back in play. In my life as an Illini fan, the only pure moment of like pure jubilance watching basketball that I can equate to that was probably when Darren hit the three against Arizona. And the stakes were higher in that game, I understand. But it truly was such a singular moment that will be on highlight reels for the rest of my time as an Illini basketball fan as it deserves to be.
Yeah, I mean, that was going to be my pick as well. For me, it's just, I think you said it perfectly. You know, it got that monkey off of Brad Underwood's shoulder, like that big boulder that's just been following him his entire career, essentially. And not just him, Illinois fans, right? Selfishly, every time we wanted to talk to another fan base, they always came back with, yeah, you guys haven't even made it to that second weekend. And, you know, it was just one of those where with that dunk and with that player making that steal and him having the key moment, of the 2024 season. I think if we, asked this question, if I made a poll before this show aired, what was the highlight of the 2024 calendar year when it comes to basketball? That would have been the majority winner. So I think that's a no-brainer. Yeah,
it was one of those, the steal and slam heard around Central Illinois. But I mean, far further than that, of course. It's funny because, I mean, the very next day, we're walking our dog and a neighbor 5 houses down commented how she heard our garage explode. This would have been damn near it was probably midnight. Yeah. And it was a cool night and I got heaters in there. It's a separate garage. So I shut the garage door knowing we would be loud. You cannot stifle enthusiasm.
Yeah.
And yet garage door closed, trying to be as polite to our neighbors as we could, and they heard it 5 houses down. But it's one of those where it's just I got it on video. It's kind of a blurry clip, but it's something that every so often I'll go back to just to be reminded. Okay, why do we do this? Why do we get invested in sports? That is a kind of feeling that nothing else conjures. So that's why, it's for those singular moments like that. I mean, I'm 38 years old, and I would put that up with my top 3 individual Illini plays that I've ever seen. And one of my earliest memories was Andy Kaufman hitting it 3 to beat Iowa. So it's like I got a list to choose from, but I will certainly put that up there.
No doubt. Now that you got the juggernaut out of the way, for me, secondary was kind of the Illinois winning the Big Ten tournament. Just because of what you mentioned earlier, right? There were questions about this team, especially, on the defensive end. But that whole Big Ten tournament experience, like with Terrence Shannon, like almost setting the record for points in that tournament, playing, I believe, one less game than the guy who owns the record.
I think has the record at 4 games, and he only had about 4 or 5 more points total.
Exactly. Like for me, it was just like if that was the highlight of the season, I would have kind of been okay with it because, again, I know this turned into a Terrence Shannon Jr. themed show, but I'm completely fine with that. The fact that he just played so well. We had a guy, Dane Danger, who had been struggling all season long. He kind of stepped up in that Big Ten tournament and, showed his contributions. It's one of those where Purdue ran away, with the conference title for the regular season. But I'm glad that Illinois team from last year, which I think was very likable, very, especially for an Illini fan. I mean, between the mask just emerging as one of the best players himself in the country, it's a big relief for me that there's going to be a banner hanging, or there's a banner hanging for that team to acknowledge, when I go to State Farm Center in the future and I bring my son with me and I can point at that flag and tell him about, hey, remember when I told you about that team? Like there's hardware to show them something about it.
That was our 4th Big Ten tournament title win overall. The run with Iowa and that team was super sweet. What happened against Loyola a week later, I don't want to say cast a pall on that, but kind of when you're a 1 seed, right? So this team had a very unique opportunity in that they were clearly not the best team in the Big Ten. Purdue was. And then when Purdue loses to Wisconsin on Saturday, you see that window of opportunity. I'll be honest, I don't think we would have beat Purdue. But you know what? They didn't beat Wisconsin, so you play who's in front of you. And in that weekend, you got to go back to Friday night where you were not great against Ohio State. But then finally in the second half, Terrence really got you going. You end up winning that game by, 6-7 points. Whew. Okay, we move on. We're going to play better tomorrow. Wrong. You were terrible against Nebraska for about 25 minutes, trailing by as much as, I think, 15, 16 points. Who puts you on their back? Terrence Shannon. You win the game by the skin of your teeth. And then the Wisconsin game, from tip to buzzer, was just an awesome college basketball game. I gained so much respect for Chucky Hepburn, who was kind of gimpy and played his butt off. AJ Storr looked like a superstar. I was pretty sure that we would have him this year based on Terrence leaving, and well, it's a perfect fit, right? A high-level basketball game that you were just better than they were, and you had the best player on the court. And it was really a harbinger of things to come for the NCAA tournament. And I would have been happy winning that Big Ten tournament, beating Duquesne, losing a tough one to Iowa State. To me, beating Iowa State was just that extra layer of validation for what it turned what was an objectively very, very good season into objectively great, and really kind of set the stage, I think, for what this team can do despite a completely different roster now that monkey, like you said, is off of Brad Underwood's back.
All right, so right after this, we will go to the
football side.
Yeah, the football.
It's going to be hard. It's going to be hard to think of the low for this, but I have one.
I'm struggling to figure one out, but we'll hear yours right after this. All right, so again, this is incredible. We're talking about the highs and lows of 2024. We've got basketball out of the way. Now we're talking about football. And usually any other year, this segment could probably take up 10, 15 minutes of our grievances. But I'm telling you, genuinely, even now as we're recording, I'm struggling to come up with what I'm going to say. So, Mike, I'm going to let you go first.
Okay. My low was still a win. What do you think I'm going to respond with now that I mentioned that?
Okay, because literally the only thing I can come up with was the second half of Purdue.
Yeah. I'll frame this a little bit. I went to the game with my dad, and we left at halftime. 24-3, 27-3. We got a late field goal. Regardless, you're up by 3 scores. Okay. Go back out to the tailgate, had some friends there, figure we got the TV out there. Let's watch it. It's Purdue, backup quarterback. We'll be fine. I don't know if there has been a half of Illinois football where I faced a borderline existential crisis like I did there. Because if you lose that game, all momentum is gone. It's dead. Now, the beautiful thing about football is even as that's going on, I just said to myself, win by a point.
Yeah.
I don't care because I still think that knowing football, it is a week-to-week proposition. You wash it, clear it from your head, and you got Michigan and all the things still on the table for you. That's fortunately what they did. But the low point was that not just because it was an awful Purdue team, and not just because it was Ryan Walters and his bulging biceps on the sideline actually calling the offense and having success with it, thus raising questions that a lot of Illini fans, myself included, had about Aaron Henry. This is only a year and a half into his tenure, and this was the low point. But big-time players make big-time plays. Luke to Pat to start overtime. Well, 2 plays later, Purdue's in there. And rightfully, they call the 2-point conversion. That is what you do. That I give Ryan Walters props, but props also to Aaron Henry for setting the pressure. Get the sack, you move on. I have never been more tightly wound, only because at that point you were 4-1 with 5-1 staring you in the face and a huge week against Michigan. And I just dreaded the thought of going to Lot 31 before the Michigan game with less wind under our sails because we lost to freaking Ryan Walters. It would have drove me nuts, but it didn't happen. That's my low point of the year. Not any of the 3 losses. That's the low point, and that's a good place to be.
So, again, it's hilarious because you named exactly what I was going to name. It'd be easy for me to talk about that loss to Oregon, where we're never in that game, but our expectations were low coming into that. Like, no one expected us to win. Penn State, kind of the same deal, right? If anything, we kept it closer than most prognosticators thought that we would. Minnesota, sure, but every season you lose games that, Illinois is not Ohio State, where you're just going and expecting to win 10, 11, 12 games every single year. So when I reflected on 2024, and I'm trying to think, at what point did I feel the worst? That Purdue game is the one that came to mind. I know you said you were at the game. I think you said you were at the game. Is that right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I was there for the first half and just like, there wasn't a mass exodus, but I would say there was a good 50,000 people there to start. And for the second half, there were probably 35,000 people that stuck just because it was a great day for tailgating. And you just figured we had this in hand. We took a little bit for granted. I certainly did.
And it was, the feeling was coming into the game, right? It was like, oh, Brett and Illinois, we're going to pound Purdue. They are so bad. Their starting quarterback is out. Finally, we get to extract some revenge on Ryan Walters. And, again, that just abhorrent second half where we barely squeeze out with the victory. But I went live immediately after that game. And I think I had like 650, 700 people on live in the chat, all it's sounding like we had lost that game. Yeah. And that's actually where I coined the phrase, a win is a win is a win, which is, I say almost on a weekly basis here at Locked On Illinois. It's just like you said, the burden that game could have carried if we had lost. We could have lost all that momentum that we had, the positive that we had built up coming into that game. And just the feeling of seeing Ryan Walters, do a fist pump or whatever, like after the game, had they won, man, I really think things could have not necessarily spiraled, because I think Brett's built a program now where things aren't going to spiral. But that week, at least up until the next game, would have been a really, really tough time for Illini fans.
That was the closest we came to a same old Illinois moment. Yeah. That was the closest, because like you said, Penn State, hey, you hung. It's fine. No one was really upset after that game. Bummed, sure, but Oregon, like you said. And here's the thing too, because you started 6-1, including that one against Purdue. This is part of the reason why the Minnesota game didn't sting that bad. It was a loss in the normal sense of the word. It wasn't the bottom falling out. It was now you're 6-3. Thank goodness for the bye week. Let's get healthy and finish the year. It's really remarkable how the Purdue game was so quickly washed away, and the Michigan game had almost everything to do with that. I mean, just to follow up 49 points given up to a backup quarterback for Purdue and give up 7 against Michigan. I mean, when I thought Aaron Henry was dead to rights, and that's the move we're going to have to make in the offseason, even if we go 7 wins or 8 wins, well, then you have a game like that, and it's like, well, God, maybe he's okay. And, man, it was just topsy-turvy with that side of the ball this year, and then what do you know? They ended very strongly as well.
In the next segment, I feel like we're going to have a lot to talk about, and that's the positives of our college football team in 2024. All right, Mike, once again, I'll let you steal whatever answer I have in my head first. What was the highlight of 2024 for you?
A week ago, on December 30th, the answer would have been very easy. It was the Michigan game. It was the stars aligning, 100th anniversary game. It could not have been nicer weather. It was the perfect football day in Champaign. I will never forget it. I'm glad I got commemorative buttons and commemorative program, and I got the 100th anniversary flag and all that stuff. For someone that grew up as a townie, it was as meaningful as a day at Memorial Stadium could have been. And then you get home and you check out the highlights from CBS and see that they rolled out the red carpet for us. CBS, Brad Nessler, Gary Danielson, like we felt legit in a way that I have not felt as an Illini football fan in so long. That would have been my answer a week ago.
So let me just cut you off, because if you're not picking that, then I'm going to pick that, because my other option is what you're about to pick right now.
Sure.
The same thing that you said, right? Illinois, Josh Whitman, Brett Bielema, they had been geared towards this Michigan game for a couple of years now, right? They'd been talking to Nike about these special new uniforms, which is not always easy to get, from Nike in general. And like you said, CBS, everyone knew this was a big deal. The city was buzzing. And, the season, I feel like in a lot of ways was geared towards that Michigan game. It was supposed to be the highlight of this team that was supposed to have finished with 6 or 7 wins. And so if you had told me after that victory that this was going to be the highlight of the season, I would have been okay with it. I would have been content with it. Like, okay, yeah, of course, beating storied Michigan. Of course, their season didn't turn out the way it did, but just the overall package and to come out with the victory. And quite honestly, we were clearly the better football team that day too, which, adds to the enjoyment of the whole process. It makes you, be proud of the football team that you have. Again, covering the Big Ten for as long as I have, I've got a lot of Michigan context, and, the consensus was Brett's really building something there in Champaign. And just to hear that sort of feedback from a fan base that just got done winning a national championship was like the ultimate validation. And I feel like that Michigan game was the one day that all of us Illini fans could just kind of celebrate together.
Yeah, that it would take a special game for me to not choose that. So, and one more thing about that, my in-laws are from Michigan. My wife's a Spartan, but the rest of her family are Michigan supporters. So I get back to the tailgate, and they had all come down for the game, and they're already at the tailgate, and they I just got to hug somebody. Okay. I'm beaming. I'm on cloud 9, and they could sense that this meant everything to us. And I think partially because they won the national title the year before, they're happy to give us our flowers. Hey, you guys were good. Right. And I got the same feedback that you were getting from family that were saying, God, you guys just kind of kicked our butt. I'm like, I guess we did. This is amazing. So it would take a huge game for me to not choose that. And I'd say 1A, 1B. And as far as home games go, that's it. But the Citrus Bowl going in was, wow, I'm here. This is cool. It's just nice. I'll be honest. It's nice to be here. Just don't get your butt kicked. I was taking the same attitude as the Penn State game. Yeah. You play them 10 times. I think you win a couple, maybe 3. Maybe today's the day. But if not, just hang, right? And I remember as the third quarter wrapped up, and I feel like at that time, South Carolina had just scored after a whole Bielema thing, which was just awesome and even better in hindsight. We didn't really know what was going on in the stadium. But even though you were trailing, you went right back down and scored to take the lead back again. And I guess at that point it would have been 14-10. You take the lead back. And it's that moment right there with probably about 12 minutes left in the game where I said, we belong. We belong. The nation is watching this game right now saying, damn, like Illinois actually, they got a shot to win this thing. They look pretty good. And now it was beyond just a Big Ten level thing, which is what the Illinois-Michigan game was, and certainly national to an extent too. This was the mighty SEC, the best team to not make the college football playoff, according to so many pundits. And you know what? Their last 6 games kind of said that they might have been South Carolina. And I just thought we were kind of a cute, fun story, and we're a program on the up. But I don't need everything right now. We already got 9 wins, and then they do that. What it does is completely reframe what was already a very good season, and it makes it objectively great. Inarguably a great season, an all-time Illini season. So to me, the Michigan game was an arrival moment in the season that said, yeah, you're good, period. And then the South Carolina one in the Citrus Bowl was, you're great, and you're bringing almost everybody back, so we'll see you next year. I mean, we'll be talked about on College Game Day next year to an extent we haven't been. We'll be behind probably the 4 top Big Ten teams, but somewhere around 5th or 6th in conference, according to most prognosticators. And I would say that's accurate. And that's just not a position I'm familiar with.
Exactly right. I've talked about that on this show before. You know, Brett has been very vocal about how he wanted Illinois to be involved in the conversation this year for the college football playoff. But if you're objectively looking at it, you know, we didn't belong, at least amongst those top 12 teams. But I've talked about it in the sense where I think what he's doing is he's building for the future. He's getting the Illinois name mentioned. And I think that game against the Citrus Bowl, again, beating South Carolina, for me, if I even want to get more specific, it's that Josh McCray run, that 60-yard run with, I think, 2 minutes left or something like that, where all of us could just breathe. You know, at that point, it looks like the game is in hand, and that was just like the culmination of the entire football season, which, you know, unfortunately and almost sadly, I had Big Ten Ted on the show. We talked about this a couple days ago. Like, Illinois' 10-3 season is going to be one of the most overlooked in history, just because us Illinois fans got to celebrate it. But the Indiana Hoosiers soaked up so much of that energy when it came to, like, who is this underdog, you know, winning every single week, that I felt like we didn't quite get the national attention that this Illinois team really deserved. Sure, it didn't have the NFL playmakers that even previous Illinois teams had. But when you just talk about just like locker rooms, you know, the individual rooms, you know, the wide receiver room, the defensive line, everything, they all just performed cohesively. And it was the embodiment of what I think a good football team looks like. There was no star on this football team. Just a lot of really good players who listened to the message that Brett Bielema has been giving them and bought into the culture. And they beat a team that they were underdogs to by 10 points, full of 4 stars, a couple 5 stars, a National Conference Freshman of the Year, potential Heisman Trophy winner next year. Illinois went there when nobody believed in them, including most of us, and they came out with the victory. And if that isn't the story of 2024 Illini football, I don't know what is.
I'll tell you why I'm okay with, you mentioned the Indiana thing, them stealing our thunder a bit. I'm okay with it. I lived through 2001 and 2007. Those are the only seasons I can compare this one to. And in 2007, it was like just a crazy meteoric rise when you won at Ohio State. Wow, Ron Zook, this ace recruiter, bringing in all these 4 occasional 5-star kids to Illinois. Look at what he did. So all of a sudden, just like that, you snap your finger, you're nationally relevant. You go back to 2001, they go 10-1 in the regular season, behind a really good quarterback in Kurt Kittner and a fairly favorable Big Ten schedule where your lone loss was at Michigan. And 10-1. I remember during that season thinking, "Oh, this is cool. We're 7-1. Wouldn't it be nice to play in the Outback Bowl or the Citrus Bowl?" And then we get in the BCS, and it was a little too big for us. And then Ron Turner never really recovered after LSU smoked us. Well, they won by 13, but they were beating us by much more. Point being, in the building a program process that a lot of other programs go through. What Illinois has all too often done is had the meteoric rise that they're unable to sustain.
Mm-hmm.
I'm okay doing this a little bit under the radar, so to speak. We were, in the eyes of the national pundits, a cute story. We were not the feared Indiana Hoosiers. But I will say this, come to season's end, and there's a guy on Twitter that I follow, it's at Thumpasaurus, and I want to say his first name is Steve, I feel like. He does these celebratory, like, Malort shots after wins. But he said something that I thought was very, very accurate. He said, other than the national championship winner, there will not be a fan base happier going into the offseason than Illinois football fans. I think there's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah.
I mean, Indiana hasn't played a football game in 4 weeks.
Right.
I would have loved to make the college football playoff, but I did ponder, would you rather win the Citrus Bowl and go 10-3 or lose in the opening round of the college football playoffs on the road, get your name slung through the mud, say that you weren't legit, Kirk Herbstreit and all those characters getting all over? I don't know, man. I kind of preferred our finish, and it'll be interesting to see, because we play Indiana in September, what kind of carryover effect there is.
Mm-hmm. All right, Mike, I knew when I thought of this topic, there's no one else I would have rather had co-host with me on this episode. Obviously, you know Mike through the 200 level podcast. Before I started Locked On Illini, before I started Illini Cast, that was one of my OGs. But Mike is now an author. Mike, tell us about your book.
Sure. Sorry. So the 200 level, an Illinois Fighting Illini basketball fans journey. You got to get all those names in there for search engine optimization on Amazon. It is a book about the last 30 years of Illinois basketball. It is equal parts sports journalism, so about what actually happened on the court, a little bit of personal narrative as far as what it was like as a fan living through each of those. It's been really cool. Even down the day after the bowl game, I go to Disney. I hadn't been since I was 13 years old, so 25 years I had been in Magic Kingdom. And I'm getting there, walking down Main Street, USA, and Andy, who's a listener, comes up and he's like, Carp. And I got an Illini shirt on. He's like, hey, I got the book for Christmas. I got it back home. I'm going to read it. And ran into a few people at Camping World Stadium in Orlando. And this is what I hope people get from the book, is that they read it and then they get to kind of relive their own Illinois basketball experiences. So it's been really cool just having these quick conversations with people that have read it. But it's on Amazon for anyone that's not in the Champaign area. And it's at both Game Day Spirit locations in Champaign, along with Jane Addams bookstore.
Yeah, absolutely. Mike, thank you so much for coming on. And hopefully this won't be the last time. We'll have you on, sometimes let's not wait till the end of the year to do a recap. We'll have you on before that.
Hey, anytime. Let me know, Sunny. I appreciate it.
All right, Mike, thank you so much.
All right, take care.
All right. I know we were supposed to talk about what we were looking forward to in 2025, but we're almost at 40 minutes already. So Mike has agreed to come on, and we're going to basically be splitting this episode in half, and you'll hear about what we have looking forward to 2025 sometime next week. Let me know in the chat what you think of 2024. What were your highs? What were your lows? Do you agree with Mike? Do you agree with myself? Do you have something different that you want to add? Again, my name is Sunny Verma. Please, on your way out, if you could hit that like button, if you could hit that subscribe button, I would sincerely appreciate it. Again, pay attention next week. I'll have Mike on again, and we'll be making some predictions for 2025. But you don't have to wait till next week for more Locked On Illini content. Of course, I'm here for you every single day because that's a promise I made towards you. Until next time, ILL. Love you guys.